When you go to a job interview, you take care of your appearance, right? You make sure you look put together and not scruffy. Why? Well, because you want to make a very good first impression. When you write your CV, you should do the same. You should make sure it looks put together and not scruffy because you still want to make a very good first impression with the person reading it, okay? So how do you do that? Well, by being extra careful with the spelling and the grammar that you use. In this video, I'm going to show you very common mistakes that people make when writing in general, but that are very important when writing your CV. And these are mistakes that even native speakers make. Yes, everyone makes mistakes. And if you're ever reading something that a native speaker wrote and you spot one of these mistakes and you wonder, is this really a mistake because a native speaker wrote it? Don't get confused. Yes, it's still a mistake. Again, it's normal to make mistakes. Everyone makes them, even native speakers. And sometimes it's not that important. For example, if you're writing a comment on social media, it's just a comment. It doesn't really matter if you make a mistake. It's better not to make them, but if you make them, well, it's fine. It's social media. But your CV, that's a different story. And that's what we're going to focus on this video. The first mistake I want to talk about is confusing homophones. Homophones are those words that sound the same, but that are spelled differently. They are very confusing, and I'm sure you've come across these mistakes many times. The most typical ones are there, your, then, affect, to, whether, here. Sometimes the spell checker won't pick up this mistake, so you have to be extra careful. Please use your common sense. The second mistake I wanted to talk about today is misusing apostrophes. Using them everywhere when you're not supposed to. So apostrophes have two jobs. Number one, they indicate a contraction, and second, they indicate possession. So when they indicate a contraction, they show that something is missing. So that apostrophe is showing you that a letter or more letters are not there. Let's see some examples. Don't, so the apostrophe here is showing you that the O in the full form do not is missing. Didn't, the same. Let's is a contraction of let us. It's a contraction of it is. And Sarah's done it, for example. That S after the name Sarah is showing that has been contracted. They also indicate possession, that something belongs to someone. For example, the company's goals, meaning the goals of the company. The team's objectives, the objectives of the team. Sarah's desk, the desk that belongs to Sarah. And I always see mistakes like these ones. Sarah gets here early. I started working in IT in the 90s. We have very unrealistic KPIs. Are these apostrophes indicating that there's something missing, like a contraction? No. Are they indicating possession? No. They are wrong. Please never ever use apostrophes like this. And that's a mistake I see all the time. I even saw a bus with an apostrophe that was incorrectly placed here in New Zealand. You know those ads at the back of buses? Well, and it's an English-speaking country and people still make this mistake. But I don't want you to be one of those people, okay? So if you want to indicate just plurality, like in this case, the 90s or KPIs, just don't use a mistake, you don't need it, okay? The third mistake I wanted to mention today was the random use of capital letters. There are rules when it comes to the use of capital letters. Please don't be a rebel and don't ignore them and do whatever you want with them. No, please follow the rules, especially on your CV. So in English, we use capital letters to write the days of the week, the months of the year, and languages. But in Spanish, we don't. We shouldn't. It's a mistake. And I see this so often, especially writing with capital letters in Spanish when we're not supposed to, right? But in English, make sure you do. So that's a big difference between both languages. In both languages, we use capital letters to write proper nouns like names of people, names of places, names of brands, and also initialisms like FYI, for example, KPI, the one I mentioned before. Those should be written with capital letters. Then if you want to make an initialism plural, like KPIs, that S should be in lowercase and with no apostrophe. Please remember. Some people choose to use capital letters to put emphasis on a word, to make it stand out. Can you do that? Can you break the rules and use capital letters this way? Yes, of course you can, but my advice is not to do it on your CV. Do it somewhere else. We've reached mistake number 4, and that is making a mess when writing bullet point lists. So there are rules when it comes to writing bullet point lists. Basically, what you have to do is make sure that each bullet point has the same structure. You can make bullet point lists of words, phrases, or sentences, but don't mix them all together. You cannot have a bullet point list with a word, a phrase, and a sentence. No. All of them should be words or phrases or sentences. And if you're writing, for example, a bullet point list of phrases or sentences, you have to make sure that all of them have the same internal structure so that the list makes sense. Let me read an example so that it's clearer. Provided strategic leadership, directing the hiring and training of new employees. The first fragment, because these are just fragments, they're not complete sentences, starts with a verb in the past, provided. And the second one with a gerund. They don't have the same structure, so this is wrong. You should say, for example, provided strategic leadership and directed the hiring and training of new employees. So there you can see that both bullet points start with the same kind of word, right? Whatever you decide to use in your bullet points, make sure it's consistent. Consistency is very important. Now, should you add punctuation to the end of each bullet point or not? It depends. If you're writing sentence fragments, like phrases, not complete sentences, no, you don't need any punctuation at all. If each bullet point is a full sentence, that is, you have a subject and the sentence is complete, then yes, you need punctuation. For example, I provided strategic leadership. Finish the sentence. Or if you say just provided strategic leadership, it's not a full sentence, then you don't need punctuation. Last but not least, mixing tenses. This is so basic that I wasn't sure if I should include it or not, but again, this is a mistake I see all the time, so I decided to include it. If you're talking about the past, your past experience, use the past. If you're talking about what you're doing now, use the present. Never mix them, okay? It won't make sense and it will make your CV look really bad. By taking care of these details, you will be showing that you pay attention to detail in general, that you take your job and your career seriously. I started this video by saying that when you go to a job interview, you pay attention to what you're wearing and your appearance in general, just to give a good first impression. Let me tell you how I see these grammar mistakes in your CV. To me, it's like showing up to the interview with dirty hair, long dirty nails, wrinkled and stained clothes. They don't give a good impression. And you don't have to be a language genius to avoid them. You just have to pay attention and don't overly rely on the spell checker, because sometimes the spell checker doesn't pick up all the mistakes. So it's up to you, okay? Use your brain power and your knowledge to make sure that your CV doesn't have these basic mistakes. All the best when writing your CV, and see you next time. Bye!